My name is Netrob, and I love decluttering other people's houses. And this is my sister's kitchen. Now, my sister lives 4.5 hours drive away from me, which really sucks. We get on really well, but because of the distance between us, we don't see each other anywhere near as much as we would like. And normally, when we are seeing each other, as is the case for this particular occasion, we are seeing each other for a few days and have our whole families in tow. So, husbands, kids, all coming along to spend time together as a family, which also means that we don't have lots of time to do things like decluttering each other's houses. Not that my sister would declutter my house, it's not her favorite thing to do. But if she lived closer, you can guarantee that she would be helping me out with my kids as much as she possibly could. Her kids are a little bit older than mine. Her boys are aged 8 and 14, about to be 9 and 15. My kids are 6, 4, and 2. And my sister is awesome with kids. Like, not that I'm bad with kids, but she's just like a natural. I wouldn't describe myself as a natural mum. She's always wanted to be a mum. Like growing up, if you lost my sister as a toddler, you can guarantee she'd be chasing after the nearest baby that she had found. She was like one of those people that was just born to mother. And the occasions where, motherhood has been really hard and we don't have a lot of family nearby. And my parents live a couple of hours drive away. My in-laws are a couple of hours drive away. My sister being 4.5 hours drive away. Like, there's nobody. I mean, I've got a cousin who's nearby, and she absolutely would help in a crisis. But like sometimes you just want to call on your mum or your sister when you're having a really rubbish day, and you just need someone to come and help you out for a bit, so you can just go sit in a quiet room on your own, or like just take yourself out of the house. Like that, I would love to have my sister nearby, and she would totally be that person. And I would love to be able to help her in her house more. And honestly, decluttering and like cleaning and organizing somebody else's house is like way easier than your own because you don't have that emotional attachment to items. And I also think that's worth bearing in mind if you're watching videos like this of somebody else in someone else's house finding it super easy to get rid of a bunch of stuff, right? It is easier when it's not your house, okay? It's going to be harder when you're tackling your own stuff. Do you have an emotional attachment to herbs and spices? Well, probably not. Some people do, but probably not. But I can guarantee you there will be stuff in your kitchen that you find it hard to make a decision about, whether that is like baking stuff or, kitchenware and mugs, stuff that people have gifted to you, things that you have spent money on. So you feel like there's that guilt attachment to it. Like there will be things that are tougher to get rid of in your own kitchen. If you can get someone to help you making decisions about decluttering, like it does make it a lot easier. So for part of this project, I had my sister around to help me. For part of this project, I had my 2-year-old around. I'm not sure she was terribly helpful. She loves spices. Like in my house, my spice drawer, my spice cupboard, because I've got this little mini spice cupboard, like you can't put a lock on it. So we've got locks on a lot of our cupboards in our kitchen. Partly that is to keep the kids safe, so we can keep anything, sharp or dangerous out of the way. And partly it's to keep our kitchenware safe from our kids. But for the spices, they're not safe. They're out there, they're vulnerable. And they are vulnerable to the 2-year-old. My 2-year-old loves opening up the spice rack, and I can hear the sound of it like as she pulls it open, and she likes to take all the spices out, and inevitably it leads to oregano all over the kitchen floor. But actually often I just let her because they're not going to harm her, and she enjoys it. So that's a great activity for her. So as soon as she saw me tackling spices, she was straight in that kitchen, but swiftly removed by my husband. So my 2-year-old absolutely adores her cousins, and she spent most of this particular time harassing her 14-year-old cousin, I would say, taking him around by the hand and getting him to play with her, whether he liked it or not. And as a teenage boy, I think he could think of a lot of other things he would prefer to do than hanging out with the 2-year-old, but he took it really well. Like he was really good with her and entertained her for a couple of hours. So, what we don't have is masses of time for this project. So, because we are visiting as a family, obviously we want to prioritize that family time together. And we had a couple of awesome days out during this particular stay. We had 4 nights away. We were staying in an Airbnb really local to my sister, just like 10 minutes drive away, and we had 2 really fun days out as family. It was a lot of fun, and my sister had us over for dinner, and we all went out for family dinner. My aunt also lives nearby, so she came along, and that was really good fun. But during this day, I tackled my sister's like understairs cupboard, her Narnia cupboard, and that was so much fun. And actually, just spent about an hour in that cupboard and made like a massive transformation. There's a separate video on that if you want to check that out after this one. And like buoyed by that experience and how much we got rid of and the transformation there. Like during that project, my sister said, "Oh, I'd love for you to tackle a couple of cupboards in my kitchen in particular that are really bugging me." And we didn't really honestly have the time for that this particular trip. I could not do it. So I said to my husband that, the day that we leave, we'll pack up the Airbnb. And then can we just head across to my sister's for an hour or two and see if I could just do a little bit in the kitchen? And because he's a lovely guy, and he humoured me there and said, "Yeah, sure. Like we'll head across." Also, like the kids, of course, they wanted to see Auntie again. My brother-in-law was working on this particular day. They wanted to see Auntie and they wanted to see their nephews and sorry, my nephews, their cousins, and they were not like quite ready to say goodbye. So that also meant they could just have a little bit more time together playing. And I got to enjoy going through everything in my sister's kitchen. So I say going through everything. We couldn't go through everything. I spent an hour and 45 on this particular project, and that was probably a little bit longer than I should have spent, given that we had to be on the road for quite a while with our kids. But once I got stuck into it, I really wanted to make as much of a dent as I could. Now, if we'd have had a whole day, we could have done the kitchen like in its entirety. It would have been a pretty full-on day, but we could have done it in a day. But when you're working, when you have young children, you just don't have that often. And that's a reality for me in my house, and that's a reality for a lot of us. And I think one thing that I found, like when you've got a project like the understairs cupboard that I tackled for my sister, you can make like a big transformation in an hour, and that can really motivate you to tackle other areas. But when I left this particular project and I left it, basically unfinished because I couldn't do the whole kitchen. I didn't have the time to do the whole kitchen. And I really wanted to do more. And the visual impact, if you open the cupboards that I tackled, massive. If you step back and you looked at the kitchen as a whole, not so massive. And my husband asked me at the end of this project, he was like, "How do you think the video is going to turn out, Nat?" And I was like, "Honestly, I'm not sure it's going to be as good as the understairs one, but bear with me, right? Because it is good. And we did manage to clear an awful lot in the time we had. But also, there's some lessons there for all of us, including me. And that is just that reminder, do what you can in the time that you have. And over time, it makes a really big impact. That is what I've been doing in my own house. I've been spending like a minimum of 15 minutes on as many days as I possibly can. And I managed 45 days of decluttering over December and January. And if you take a look at my video of my before and I say after, my before and during, so looking at what I managed in that couple of months, it made a really big difference. And that's going to be true here in this kitchen. The time that my sister can spend, if she can spend, 15 minutes here and there, tackling a drawer, tackling a cupboard, she'll get there. But this has been like a bigger dent, I guess, to kick her off, get her started, tackling those couple of cupboards that annoyed her the most. And those cupboards were the one that I'm working on right now, and the other side, the one on the right hand side, lower cupboard. That was another one that was really bugging her. So the first thing I did was just take a look through my sister's cupboards and just get the kind of gist of what she seemed to have like a lot of. And for me, it felt like there was a lot of food scattered across a lot of different cupboards. And we didn't tackle all of those, but we did tackle the bulk of the food. So, what I decided to do was to take out as much food as possible and just go through it, looking at the dates. Now, with tinned food, you can be a bit more flexible when it comes to dates. Like, if tinned food has gone out of date, like by a few months, even potentially a bit more, it depends how you feel as an individual, then, I think they're still pretty good to use. But if you're looking at fresh food, you've got your meat and your veggies and your fridges. Like, I'm not as lenient. There are some things, I think some yogurts and like milk, if it smells okay, it's okay. But like meat is a big no-no for me. If it's out of date, it's out of date, and I don't use it. But tin stuff is different. So here, where we had items that might have like just gone out of date or be just about to go out of date, I put those back in cupboards at the front and just highlighted them to my sister, like, use these up first. But tackling any decluttering project, I think if you are making like easy decisions early on, like getting rid of out of date food or just getting rid of actual rubbish, actual trash from an area, that can really help you like get started on a project. So when I look at any project like this, like looking at a kitchen like this, it can be a bit overwhelming, right? There's a lot. And you can think, where do I start? How do I go about this? Then I would say, well, with a kitchen, if you've got washing up to do, tackle washing up first. My sister had already done that. And then tackle rubbish. So my 2-year-old has come back to help me out here. And do you know what? I'm never going to say no to some mid decluttering cuddles. So we were going through a lunchbox there was found within my sister's lunch bag, and that had not been washed up, so she'd missed that one. So that's gone into soak. And do you know, as I'm editing this video and looking through my 2-year-old found this lunch bag that my sister said they're not really using so much anymore, and she really took a fancy to it. So my sister said she could keep it, and I totally forgot to bring it home, but I'm sure she'll keep it for her. So with that, happy with her new lunch bag, she toddled off to the next room, probably to go show her cousins what she'd managed to nick off them. And here, going through this cupboard now, I'm pulling out bakeware and we're making some decisions. So going through the food, I've done that on my own because I can make those decisions on my own because it's about sell by dates and use by dates. And with the bakeware, I've got my sister hanging out in the kitchen now in the background, and I'm asking her some questions so we can make some quick decisions. And we are aiming for quick decisions. Quick yes, no. Is this something you've used recently? Is this something you feel you might use? Because we have some new items in there that my sister had bought to make particular recipes in her air fryer. So she wanted to keep those items even though she hadn't used them yet. And then with Tupperware, I'm simply piling that up to one side. We've got a load more Tupperware in the other cupboard. So what I want to do with Tupperware is go through it, match up lids, make sure we actually have lids for all of the Tupperware, as well as, is this an item that you're using? Because sometimes we buy Tupperware in a certain size and we find we don't like it, or perhaps we've used it a lot and it's no longer good, it's become a bit warped or a bit too stained. And, we can make those decisions, I think, when we've got everything together. So matching those items, like items together. And I think, even with food, that can be helpful. Because one thing we found here is we've got an awful lot of tinned tomatoes. We had a lot of pasta. And here, I think so many of us are guilty of this. We go shopping and we buy the same things that we usually buy. So, do we cook a lot with chopped tomatoes? Yes, we do. Right. So we buy chopped tomatoes without being able to assess how much we have. And that's hard to do if you're not grouping your food items together in your cupboards, in your pantry. Okay, so what we want to do here is group things together. So we end up having like all of the tinned tomatoes together, all the pasta items together, all of our soups and noodles together. And then we can easily see when we open the cupboard before we go food shopping, do we have enough of a category? Or do we need more items? And make sure that things are not going out of date before we can use them. I'm taking some time here to wipe down the inside of the cupboards. And I would say that when we're doing decluttering, our focus should be on decluttering and not deep cleaning. But where you have areas of your house that you don't commonly, you're not able to get to commonly. So cupboards, we don't often empty a cupboard out entirely in our kitchen. So when it is empty, take the time to just give it a wipe over. Just spend the time that you have. Here, I thought I could spend a little bit more time and just tackle some of these cupboard fronts, because this is an area where my sister is doing a lot of cooking. She's got her air fryers at the top. And I'm just showing you the chaos that happens when you're working in a small area, right? We've got stuff all around the floor, we've got stuff on the work surfaces. And it's also why we're tackling a couple of areas at a time, not getting absolutely everything out of every cupboard, because that can be dangerous, okay? And also, when you're a parent, you've got young children, you take everything out from all of your cupboards in the kitchen, and suddenly your kid needs you. And that can happen whether your kids are 2 or they're 14, okay? They need you, whether that is because they need a meal, or whether that's because they need help with their homework, or perhaps they need your time and attention. If they're young like mine, they'll struggle to go longer periods without having you, spend that proper quality time with them. So don't get everything out unless you can actually tackle everything. And that's pretty rare in my experience. Like, how often do you get like a whole day as a parent that you can dedicate to decluttering tasks and not have your kids around? So I tackle things, particularly in my own house. I wouldn't get this much stuff out. I would just tackle like one cupboard at a time. And that way I know that if I get called away to help my kids with something, or I'm needed somewhere else and I can't really come back to that project, like I could get stuff back in a cupboard easily enough. If I had to just pile it back in and tackle it another day. And that does happen to me all the time. So now we're going to start to get things back in cupboards. And here I am thinking about a couple of things. I'm thinking about height. So I don't want things high up. That we're going to be using on a regular day-to-day basis. My sister's mother-in-law lives nearby and she often helps out with childcare. And when she's doing that and she's helping out in my sister's home, she'll be preparing meals for my nephews. And she's a little bit shorter and she has some mobility challenges. She won't be able to get to high cupboards. So for things that we're going to be using regularly with meals for various reasons, we want to keep them accessible. Also, she struggles to get low down in cupboards. So we thought about that as well, and trying not to have too much low down that mother-in-law might want to get to on a regular basis. So they have their breads in this particular cupboard on this particular shelf. That's something they're going to be reaching for regularly to make a sandwich, to make toast. I don't want to put bread in a totally different location and then have them have to relearn their kitchen, okay? Their kitchen layout works for them. We want to work roughly with that. But what I also want to do is group items. So what I am doing, I'm grouping our noodles and soups on that top shelf, because I don't think they're going to be using those maybe as regularly, or that's something that they can get a step out if they need to kind of reach them. And it means that that category can all be together. Then we've got our spices, our stock cubes, our cooking oils, things that we will cook with on that lower shelf. And one thing I really think for my sister's kitchen that I found generally, I need to have a chat with her about, is that I think quite a few of her cupboards could do with an extra shelf. And I think we should be able to buy those separately and add in some more shelves. I thought that was some of the shelves that I tackled, but also some of the other shelves that we didn't get around to. There's a cupboard which has medicines in. I really felt like that cupboard could benefit from another shelf. So that is something I think on a future trip we could do, but it's also something for you to think about. Could you do with another shelf? Or could you get rid of a shelf where you have like a taller items, perhaps? And moving shelves is something we don't think about that much, but moving shelves within your kitchen cupboards is actually super easy. You don't need any real tools for it. You don't need any drills and screwdrivers. You just have to take out the kind of little studs that sit below the shelf and then push them in to where you want the shelf to be relocated. So, in an ideal world, I'd have loved to have got the bulk of those like pantry items into one like double cupboard at the top. But it became apparent to me as I was going through everything that was not going to be possible. Like, we had too much to fit into just that double cupboard. I'd have loved to have got that plastic tub into that cupboard, and I could have put my pastas back in there. So my pastas, my sister's pastas back in there. I couldn't do that either; it didn't fit. So I'm going to utilize that elsewhere. So in this lower cupboard, we end up with one half of that lower section being all pastas and rices, and then we have sauces that we use with pastas and rices. So we've got our curry sauces and our pasta sauces on the other side, and then at the top we've got our chopped tomatoes all on one side, and then we have like baked beans and other items on the other side. So it's all grouped together. It will take them a little bit of re-navigating of their kitchen cupboards to get used to those groupings, but hopefully they make sense and we've still got food in similar cupboards. But what we don't have is food in every cupboard. So where we have this big corner cupboard, we had all our pastas and our rices in there, but it clearly wasn't working because there were so many open packets of like packets. There were like 4 open packets of spaghetti. There were several open packets of rice. There were several open packets of macaroni. So clearly they hadn't managed like what they had open, what they had in reserve, what stock they needed, and it was all getting lost in that cupboard. So by putting them together, making them more visible, making them more accessible, hopefully that will stop happening. And we're going to reuse this particular tub to put our smaller kitchen items in together. So there's little omelette makers and the burger press and all the items and gadgets that my sister has for her air fryer are all in that plastic tub. So when she knows that she wants one of those smaller items, she'll know it's likely to be in that tub. She can pull the whole tub out and have a rummage through in order to access those items. We've got the plastic kitchenware. My sister had borrowed that to use for this particular weekend. That will go back to mother-in-law's. And she's super sweet. When we visit, of thinking like what we will need, she borrowed a stair gate from a friend to put on her stairs to keep my 2-year-old safe, because 2-year-olds love to go up and down the stairs. So now we are tackling the other cupboard that my sister, was really bugging her. This particular cupboard. She couldn't find what she needed. And one of the issues there was that she had a large kitchen appliance that she wasn't using. Somebody had given it to her, but she hadn't found it particularly useful. And it's just too big for her kitchen. Okay. So she is now in the background again, helping me make some decisions, what things are and what we want to keep. We're putting all of our Tupperware together still here because we've got Tupperware from the other drawer. And I'm thinking all the time about how I'm going to utilize the spaces, how we're going to group things together. We have some kitchenware and some frying pans I've left in the other cupboard. But I basically come to the decision once I can see everything out, we're going to dedicate this particular cupboard to cookware. So we're going to have our baking trays, we're going to have our frying pans, we're going to have our saucepans, our mixing bowls in this particular cupboard. Because once we get rid of that larger kitchen appliance, we free up space. And then the other cupboard that you just saw me working on, we can have our lunch boxes and our Tupperware in there. And this other kitchen item, the blender that you see at the top, that's going to live in there too. So when you're decluttering an area, you're tackling any area in your house, whether that's your kitchen, whether that's your bedroom. Don't be afraid to change things around as you go, which is what we did here in the kitchen. So once I had gotten the food items largely put away in cupboards, I had a chat with my sister and she said, where you got the snacks, Nat, and you've got some of like the cakey bits and popcorn stuff all up high. But actually, she said, my boys often make their own lunches. They're a bit older than my kids, right? My kids are definitely nowhere near at the point of making their own lunch. But my sister's boys, they can largely make their own lunch. And that's something we want to encourage, right? We want them to be as self-sufficient as possible, ready for the wider world as they're getting older, particularly the 14-year-old. So some of those items he would use and have alongside his lunch. So it's important that they're accessible for him because he's still not, he's not reached his full height at 14. And we want things to be a bit more visible. Also, as a 14-year-old boy, if you can't see it immediately, it doesn't exist. So I move those items back to more the area where they had been previously, where he was familiar with, and where they were a little bit more accessible. So if you're using your space in a certain way and it works for you, just carry on with it, right? You don't have to have a space functioning in a particular way because it's, more aesthetically pleasing, or because somebody else comes into your house like me and thinks it would work better that way. If it works well for you, don't be afraid to continue with it working that way. So we carry on thinking about, how would we utilize a space best? We can change things around, try it out. If it doesn't work, mix things up a bit and start again. You know how Tupperware lids have a habit of disappearing on us, much like socks that go into the dryer and never return again. Well, I found out why for my sister's cupboard here, because there was a gap in the cupboard around the corner that went right down to the floor. And I found quite a lot of Tupperware lids down there, including some that were incredibly dusty and grubby from where they had disappeared from view. But we managed to retrieve a lot of those, as well as all the other attachments for that particular kitchen item that my sister wanted to gift on to somebody else. This is such an unflattering angle, guys. As a woman who is a little bit overweight and has a questionable tattoo chosen at the age of 16, which, yes, is illegal, or was illegal, certainly is now and was back when I had it, but still. Um, I was very pleased. I would say I don't regret it now because, all of these decisions that we make when we're younger, as long as, thankfully I didn't get a tattoo like smack bang on my forehead or anywhere particularly visible on a day to day basis. It makes me smile to think of that period of my life where I had a lot of fun and I was a little bit mischievous. But at this angle, when I'm leaning into a cupboard, it's not the best. So please forgive me for that. And now we have largely tackled a lot of these cupboards. I'm getting rid of the step here to give us a bit more space and making some decisions here in terms of moving that cookware, moving the frying pans, so that we have all of our like baking stuff, everything we're going to utilize for cooking a meal in those cupboards. And then we can concentrate on having our Tupperware, lesser used appliances in this other corner cupboard. And my sister can, try that out and see if it works well. I would say, as I was going through the kitchen, I could sense my sister was getting a little bit stressed out at one point. And, visibly at one stage, as you saw, there's quite a lot of stuff suddenly out on the work surfaces. And that can be really stressful if you get to that point in a project that you are working on in your own home. Just take yourself off for a break. Removing yourself from the room entirely, ideally, like just sit down, have a peaceful cup of tea. If you can, have a little 5-10 minute walk around the block and get some fresh air before going back in. And here is again where it really benefits us to tackle smaller areas at a time. If you are somebody who can find like having a lot of stuff out very overwhelming, and I think that is true for most of us, to be honest. I think, and I certainly had points where I had everything out that I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got everything out, and there's quite a lot of stuff here. And if it's your own place and you've suddenly got everything out, like that is quite overwhelming. Like, oh my goodness, I've got a lot of stuff. And where am I going to put it? And why do I have so much? All these things racing through your brain. And I could sense that from my sister and did say to her at one point, like, are you finding this a bit stressful? And she's like, yes. Yes, I am. And at that point, I thought, right, we need to start wrapping this up. In an ideal world, I would have tackled, like, I would have loved to tackle the stuff that was on top of the kitchen cabinets. And my sister said to me, like, right at the outset, I know there's stuff up there that I don't want, I don't need. But also, as I asked her about them, she said, "Look, I just don't have the capacity to gift them on right now. Like, they're still working items and I want to give them away, but I just don't have capacity." So what we end up with, we still have those items up there visually. The kitchen doesn't look massively different, but when you open the cupboards, it does. They are more organized. So much stuff has gone. We've got a system in place. I think we could do with some more shelves, but that's okay. And, now they'll be able to find things a bit more easily, use things up, know what they've got. This is still as organized as it was before. We haven't touched it. It was fairly organized before. But just to show you, I didn't get around to touching this baking cabinet. I totally think we could do more there. But this corner cupboard we did tackle. It looks so much better. We got rid of so much there. It should function so much better for my sister. We didn't get around to tackling this one, but that's fine. We're using things apparently in that cupboard a lot more regularly. This cupboard we did tackle. And it's looking so much better. All of our Tupperware has lids. It's all organised. All our lunch boxes are together. And in terms of what we got rid of, so, we still have stuff to do there, that's fine. And my sister hopefully will be able to tackle some of that soon. And in terms of what we got rid of, so much stuff. So we actually have more recycling because all the cardboard recycling my sister took straight out. She didn't realise I needed that for the video. That's fine. We'll forgive her. So we've got a bag of recycling plastics and glass, 2 big bin bags to go to our local tip. And then we have a large bag with this appliance, which will be gifted on locally. It's perfectly good. Just my sister doesn't need it. A couple of baking trays there that she doesn't need. Look at how much stuff we got rid of in that time. And I will see you in the next one. I hope you enjoyed this. Bye.